Hello, and how are you, my friends? I'm Peter, and here I'm telling you stories about the most interesting European cars of the 80s and 90s. Today we're talking about the only front-wheel drive car of Lotus, Lotus Elan M100. But before we start, please subscribe to this channel. I really need your subscriptions to make this channel more visible on YouTube and to share these stories with more people. And if you're already subscribed, I really appreciate your trust. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the car. Lotus used the name Elan for the second time with this car. The first Elan was produced from 1962 to 1975 and was a great and legendary car, one of the best steering cars ever made. It was very light with its composite body. It was powerful enough to be one of the most dynamic cars of the 60s. It had a lot of very interesting engineering solutions. And it brought Lotus a lot of fame and money. But the time went on, and the original Elan was discontinued in 1972 for the two-seater Roadster, and in 1975 for the extended 2+2 version. Colin Chapman, the founder of Lotus, entered into agreement with Toyota in 1982 to develop several new cars, including a new small Roadster to replace the Elan. But at the end of the same year, Colin Chapman died. In 1983, an international conglomerate of investors took over Lotus Cars company. But soon they realized that they need serious external financing to continue the development of the cars. And in 1986 the company was sold to General Motors. For the first 4 months, Toyota also was the second investor, but soon it sold its share to GM. And since that time, Lotus technically was and is owned by foreign shareholders. Meanwhile, the development of a new small cars together with Toyota continued, and a development prototype under the name M90 was built in 1984 with Toyota engine and transmission. This car allegedly had some influence on the creation of Toyota MR2. But in 1986, General Motors decided to cease the M90 project and develop a completely new small roadster under the project name M100. Later the name Elan was revived for this car, and it went into production in 1989. The design of the new Elan was created by Peter Stevens, who was the chief designer for Lotus at that time. Later he created some other very remarkable cars, such as Jaguar XJR 15, Rover 75, and, together with Gordon Murray, McLaren F1. The idea of the car was the same as in the original Elan. A small, relatively light, two-seater convertible with composite body, which it was fun to drive. But there was a very significant difference. The new Lotus Elan was a front-wheel drive car. Actually, it was the first and the last front-wheel drive car in Lotus history. The development was led by General Motors, and they invested a lot in this project. It was the most expensive development for Lotus so far. The car was intended for sale in the American market, and it was tested heavily in the US, clocking about 1 million miles on test everywhere from Arizona to Antarctica. And this gave its fruits. The car was great to drive, and actually it was pretty reliable. For this car, GM used 4-cylinder 1.6-liter 16-valve engine from Isuzu, a Japanese automaker that was partly owned by GM. It was a good engine that was available in two versions for the Elan. A naturally aspirated one with 130 horsepower, and another one with a turbo, giving it 162 horsepower. The most popular turbo version had a top speed of 137 miles or 220 km per hour, and 0 to 60 miles per hour acceleration in 5.8 or 6.5 seconds according to different sources. Definitely not bad for the 80s. Actually, during the whole production time, Lotus sold only 129 naturally aspirated cars. The absolute majority of Elans were sold with turbo engines. All cars were equipped with a 5-speed manual transmission from Isuzu. This transmission got some negative reviews because switching gears was some kind of soft and non-informative, nothing comparable to the sharp work of the gearbox on the first Elan. But actually it was a rather good and reliable transmission, just not sporty enough. The overall handling of the car was great, simply great. It was predictable, informative and full of joy. The Autocar magazine described the Elan as, quote, the quickest point-to-point car available, unquote. It was the best handling front-wheel drive car ever made by that time, and it probably still is. It wasn't crazy fast, but it was fast enough. More than enough for the 80s actually. And with a very decent drag coefficient of 0.34, it was very fuel efficient for that time. But, and this is a big but, it was a front-wheel drive car. And for many reviewers, car journalists and Lotus enthusiasts, it wasn't a real Lotus. Those things that made the Elan nearly perfect, its secure handling and predictability, were perceived as a lack of character. Of course, the new Elan was compared to the original one, and the new car simply didn't have that racing feeling, emotion, and driver's involvement that the old Elan had. And this review stopped many of the customers from buying. Before the actual launch of the car, Lotus had over 4,000 pre-orders. But after the car went into production and received the first public reviews, a significant part of those orders was cancelled. So, in 3 years, Lotus sold only 3,855 Elans, and only 559 of them were sold in the United States. Well, you may say that this car was never intended to be sold in great numbers. But I did find an article from 1988 where Ron Foster, president of Lotus Cars USA, said that Lotus planned to sell 2,000 Elans in the US every year. But they actually sold only 559 in 3 years. Was it a failure? Well, decide for yourself and please tell me what you think in the comments below. Just for comparison, the original Elans were sold in a quantity of from 9 to 12,000 by different sources. And the first generation of Lotus Elise, which came in the market in the 90s, had a production run of over 8,000 cars. Anyway, in July of 1992, the Elan M100 was discontinued. And in August of 1993, General Motors sold Lotus to Italian businessman Romano Artioli, who also owned the brand Bugatti at that time. But surprisingly, it was not the end of the Elan. In 1994, Artioli found out that 800 of engines and transmissions of the Elan, as well as other parts, were still in the Lotus warehouses. So they made another 800 Elans in 1994 and 1995. These cars had some small exterior updates, some improvements in the suspension, and slightly weaker engines due to the installation of catalytic converters. Now it was 155 horses instead of 162. But this also wasn't the end. After this, Lotus sold the production rights to Kia, which produced another 1056 cars under the names Kia Elan in Korea, Kia Roadster for the German market, and Kia Vigata for Japan. Those cars had a different 1.8-liter 4-cylinder engine with 151 horsepower from Kia itself. Some minor exterior and interior changes were made, but in general it was the same Lotus Elan. So, what was the reason for the low sales? Why this Elan was some kind of forgotten and considered a failure by many? Was it the car itself? No. The car was nearly perfect for its time. Great handling, good comfort, enjoyable dynamics, nice look, all in place. Better reviews? Yes, this was a problem. The name Elan had a very strong, legendary ancestry, and of course the new car was compared to the old one. Was the new one worse? It is a very discussable topic, but it definitely was different. Too much different, and this was hardly acceptable for many Lotus enthusiasts. And there was another big problem. The car was very expensive. General Motors invested too much into development and testing and couldn't sell the Elan cheaply. They were going to sell it in the US for $28,000. But when the car actually appeared, the real price in the US was almost $40,000, almost $100,000 in today's money. For that money you could buy a Corvette with a V8 engine. It didn't have a British racing legacy or impeccable handling, but it was larger, faster, more powerful, more comfortable, and better known in the United States. So those who could afford Elan preferred different sports cars, and all others preferred another new two-seater roadster, Mazda MX-5 Miata. Miata was greatly inspired by British roadsters of the 60s, the same Lotus Elan and MG MGB. It was and it is a great car without doubts, which became a legend itself, but in 1989 it was just the beginning. I heard several times that the new Elan had actually better handling than the first generation of Miata, and this may be true, no offense to Miata. But Mazda was significantly cheaper, and this decided the results of this competition. I believe that the Lotus Elan M100 was a great car, but underrated by car enthusiasts and undeservingly forgotten. It was overshadowed by the first original Elan, and later by a new Lotus Elise. but it was a very interesting car that truly deserves attention. If you want to buy one now, it may be not that easy. With the limited sales in the United States, it is difficult to find it here for a good price. But these cars are older than 25 years, so you can buy one in Europe and import it to the US. And if you do want one, check out my website in the description below. In the UK, you currently can buy the Elan M100 in decent condition with a right-hand steering wheel from 6 to 13,000 British pounds. In continental Europe, the price is higher, and you are looking at 15 to 30,000 euros for a good option with a relatively low mileage. The advantages of these cars are left-hand steering and, in case of Southern Europe, less corrosion on the metal parts of the chassis and suspension. Of course, there may be cheaper options if you search deeper and longer. Well, thank you very much for watching. If you owned or drove Lotus Elan, please tell me about your experience in the comments below. And if you had an opportunity to compare the Elan to Mazda MX-5 or to MG Rover V8, which I have a video about, I would really love to know your impressions. Which one drives better? And if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. New interesting stories are coming soon. Thank you so much, my friends, and see you next time.